Diversity Research Forum. I'm Professor James Liu, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Center for Applied Cross-Cultural Research. We've held diversity research forums for, I think this is the fourth one. And in previous ones, we've done more survey-type work, looking at what type of diversity research has been going around in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And but this year, I mean, we've done a lot of the kind of big-scale coverage. So we try to invite some of major research projects on diversity to come here and share their research. Now, unfortunately, we weren't able to get some of the major projects, and I'd just like to mention them. There's work by Paul Spoonley and his group up at Auckland. It's a continuation of the New Settlers program looking at integration, and unfortunately they won't be represented here. And we also had Prue Holmes at Waikato looking at intercultural communication, and she was going to participate earlier but had to pull out because of a scheduling conflict. But the remaining presentations we have are also quite outstanding examples of intercultural research. And so we're going to be looking first at Colleen Ward's work, looking at Muslim youth, and then we'll be looking at Anne-Marie Masgaret and Alan Bailey's work on long-term migration southern. Actually, no, they'll be last. They'll be anchoring our approach because they're too technically sophisticated for the computer here. And they've had the brand new latest PowerPoint that this computer unfortunately doesn't. So we have someone right now running around trying to find a computer that has the latest Microsoft. So we just have to blame the evil empire. They're so selfish. You have to update your software all the time.
Don't update your software.
That's right. If everyone doesn't update, then we'll all be fine. That's right. But then followed by that, we'll have April Henderson, who will be focusing on our research in the hip-hop community. And are you going to cover a little bit of the Pacific as well?
I'm going to cover all three projects.
Okay. Oh, wow. So she's going to actually have packed information in terms of some Pacific research as well. And I'll talk about some research with the Chinese community, especially New Zealand Chinese Association, and then Anne-Marie and Alan will anchor and finish. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Professor Colleen Ward of the Center for Applied Cross-Cultural Research. Do you want to stand?
No, I'll stand here. This is not the most conveniently located for a speaker and to do the slides, but I'm going to stand, and I'm sure you'll all be able to hear me. What Jim didn't actually mention is his work with the Chinese community, April's work, and Peggy Fairbairn Dunlop in the Pacific communities, and my research with my students, Jamie Stewart and Zena Adam, are all part of a larger project called Youth Voices, Youth Choices, Identity, Integration and Social Cohesion in Aotearoa, New Zealand. This is a forced-funded project which has just, at the end of June, come to an end. So we'll be sharing some of our findings with you on that project. Now, it's a massive project, so you're only obviously going to get just a little slice of what we have to say and what we've been doing, what our findings are. And what I'm going to concentrate on today with respect to the Muslim youth are essentially three key questions. So we're going to look at identity. Who are our Muslim youth? How do they see themselves? We're going to look at adaptation. How well do they adapt socially and psychologically to living in New Zealand? And what kind of factors facilitate their adaptation? And thirdly, we're going to look at issues pertaining to social cohesion and ask questions such as, to what extent do our Muslim youth experience prejudice and discrimination, social exclusion, and what can we do about it? If that's the case, what factors might be used to promote integration and social cohesion? Now, the research findings that I will be sharing with you really come from three databases or three separate pieces of research. First of all, we have a survey of 180 Muslim youth, teenagers essentially, aged 13 to 19. The survey participants were predominantly first generation, 81% were overseas born, 65% of the sample were Asian, with the balance African 23%, Middle Eastern 7%, and about a third of the sample came from a refugee background. This survey is part of a much larger international project that explores issues pertaining to identity, acculturation, discrimination, issues such as social connectedness and psychological and social adaptation. In addition to our quantitative survey research, we have some qualitative action-oriented research, and in particular, 2 sets of workshops. First of all, our workshop for young Muslim leaders. These were held both in Auckland and Wellington with 36 participants. The workshop explored issues about identity and perceptions of success, what are their resources and barriers to achieving success, and issues pertaining to both their personal and community goals. And the final workshop, our Building Bridges workshop, which was conducted in Wellington, with 20 brought together Muslim and non-Muslim girls. So 24 participants here, aged 13 and 14. Let me tell you, the energy level was something I'm definitely not accustomed to. It was amazing. And this workshop explored stereotypes, identity, and issues pertaining to social cohesion. So, first of all, let's look at these themes, identity and integration. And one thing we found in our research here, a common theme, was about achieving balance. In our workshop, our leadership workshop, we asked young people to draw an identity map, something which represented who they are as young people in New Zealand. And here we have just one example from a young Muslim woman seeking perfection. And as you can see in the layers of her headwear, she names her family roles, she looks at her relationship to her broader community. Down the side of the shoulder, she looks at some ethnic national issues. I don't know if you comment, you can read it. It says like Australian, Kiwi, Pakistani, Indian, global citizen, confused. But you do see, I think, you can extract from this attempting to achieve a sense of balance. You may see the pin on your right, which says Allah and Islam, and written up the side, it has the pin is tying all of the layers together. And the nose, as you'll see, is an upside down question mark, and it says balance. So this gives you just a sort of one look at how a young person in New Zealand may see themselves. And you can see some similar themes in this identity map, where you can see both the New Zealand and the Pakistani flag. You can see Islam and the mosque and the prayer mat very centrally, but you also see this young woman's role as a student, and the path, the Sunni path, which has some caution lights on it that she's described as family to keep her on the path, and also some bumps, which are her friends. So I think, you see senses of connectedness to family, to community, and you see an attempt to sort of balance, if you will, one's religious identity and one's sense of being a Kiwi. And this was confirmed very much in our quantitative data. This comes from our survey work. And you see in the bar graph the measures of their Muslim ethnic and national identity. This reflects the strength. Now, if you bear in mind the scales we used in this research range from 1 to 5, with 5 indicating stronger senses of identity. And what you can see is that for these youth, all of their identities are uniformly strong, Muslim, ethnic, and national. But it is true that Muslim identity is significantly stronger than both ethnic and national. So it's very core, it's very strong. When we look at this in a different way and say, okay, when we look at our sample as a whole, we look at their identities as New Zealanders, their national identity, we look at their religious identity being Muslim. Are these identities weak or strong? And we do this 2-by-2 graph. We find that 85% of our sample of 180 Muslim youth have both strong national and Muslim identities, meaning they're integrated. The vast majority are strongly integrated. They strongly feel like they belong in New Zealand, and they have strong Muslim identities. Okay. What about adaptation and the road to success? Our particular research was concerned very much with psychological and sociocultural adaptation, and we used standard measures that were part of a larger project where we have data from various ethnic and religious groups in New Zealand, as well as data from 13 other countries. But I'm only going to share to you right now the results looking at psychological well-being and social adaptation. And here we have 2 measures, both life satisfaction as a positive indicator of well-being and psychological symptoms as a negative one. We've compared the results from our Muslim youth with Māori and New Zealand European, and what we can see from this slide is that our Muslim youth had greater life satisfaction and reported fewer psychological symptoms than either Pākehā or Māori youth. So they're doing well. And the same is true when we look at social adaptation, which we measured in terms of school adjustment and behavioral problems. And we see again that the Muslim youth reported better school adjustment and fewer behavioral problems when compared to their Māori and Pākehā peers. So what we seem to be seeing is evidence that we have integrated youth who are largely well adapted. I do say one caveat here though, that to complete our survey, they did have to have a level of English fluency. So we are talking about youth who have the language ability, okay?